Welcome to the deep dive. We sift through the sources, pull out the key insights, and aim to get you informed quickly. Today, we're jumping into, well, probably one of the most debated books ever, the Book of Revelation. For, almost 2 millennia, the standard view has been, that it's about the distant future. The end times, usually linked to a late writing date, maybe 95 CE, Emperor Domitian's time.
That's certainly the framework most people are familiar with, yeah. It colors all the interpretations of that really complex imagery.
But here's the twist we're exploring today.
Mm.
What if that core assumption, what if it's just fundamentally wrong? What if the clues inside the book itself, plus some pretty compelling historical records, actually point much, much earlier?
Right.
And what if those famous prophecies aren't about way off in our future, but were fulfilled with astonishing precision back in the 1st and 2nd century?
That's a radical shift. It's not just about shuffling dates, is it? It really makes you question the nature of prophecy itself.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive is to look at the historical evidence, the arguments placing Revelation before 70 CE. We're going to trace its prophecies through this really specific 74-year period, 62 CE, all the way to 136 CE. And this isn't just, some dry academic exercise. The sources suggest this view turns Revelation from this opaque future code into a powerful, historically grounded testimony. Prophecy fulfilled.
And to really get a handle on it, we need to break it down. We'll look at 4 distinct phases within that 74-year historical arc. Each phase builds on the last, creating a remarkably coherent picture.
Okay, let's unpack that. The basic idea is this. If Revelation was written before 70 CE, then its prophecies shouldn't be about, say, the 21st century or beyond. They should match up with specific things that happened soon after it was written.
Right, and the sources we're drawing on argue that's exactly what you find when you look closely at that 62 to 136 CE window.
And there's something you mentioned, a chronological lock.
Yes, exactly. Our sources pinpoint a specific date, May 19th, 62 CE. It's presented as this absolute anchor point in history for dating several New Testament books.
An anchor. How can one single day be that critical for dating ancient texts?
Well, because you have this convergence. Several New Testament books, Hebrews, James, Jude, and Revelation itself, all seem to prophesy the very same event.
Which event is that?
The coming of the Lord, specifically with heavenly armies appearing in the clouds, signaling judgment. Hebrews talks about the day approaching, and he that shall come will come.
Okay.
James says, the judge standeth before the door. Jude mentions, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints.
And Revelation opens with it, right? Must shortly come to pass, the time is at hand, he cometh with clouds. It's all very immediate language.
Precisely. So the argument goes, if that specific phenomenon, armies in the clouds, was actually seen and historically recorded on May 19th, 62 CE, then all these books must have been finished before that date. Otherwise, it's not prophecy, it's just writing about something that already happened.
Right, it becomes history, not foresight. Post-diction, not prediction.
Exactly. And the key historical source here is the Jewish historian Josephus. In his Wars of the Jews, he gives a pretty stunning account for that exact date, May 19th, 62 CE.
What does he say?
He writes, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, before sunsetting, chariots and troops of soldiers in their armor were seen running about among the clouds and surrounding cities.
Wow. Actual chariots and soldiers in the sky. That's incredibly specific imagery and not just a weird cloud.
It's very specific. And Josephus wasn't alone. Other historians from the time, like Tacitus and Pliny the Elder, even the Jewish Talmud, mention unusual celestial signs around this period. It seems this was a widely observed event.
Okay.
And the interpretation offered is that this aerial display was the initial divine sign, the starting gun, if you will, for the judgment coming upon Jerusalem.
That's a really important distinction, isn't it? This sign in May 62 is seen as the opening of Revelation's first seal.
Yes, the white horse rider.
But it's not the start of the actual Jewish war against Rome. That came later.
Much later. Over 4 years later, in the autumn of 66 CE, that delay is crucial.
Okay, so that brings us to the first block of time in this framework. Phase 1, the 6 seals period. That's May 62 CE running up to autumn 66 CE.
Correct. This 4-year stretch is presented as a time of, let's say, preliminary judgments. Things are starting to unravel, but it's kind of below the radar. It's not open warfare yet.
So the first seal, the white horse, is that May 19th, 62 CE event, the armies in the sky.
That's the argument. It authenticates the coming judgment and starts the countdown.
And then, as the other seals metaphorically open over the next 4 years, what's happening on the ground?
You see those below-radar things intensifying, according to
Yeah.
the sources, more people claiming to be the Messiah, rising tensions between different Jewish factions, sometimes violently, relations with Rome getting steadily worse, economic problems, social instability. It's a slow burn.
And wasn't there a specific figure Josephus mentions during this exact time?
Ah, yes, a really interesting, almost tragic figure. A peasant named Jesus, son of Annas.
Not that Jesus, obviously.
No, a different man. Our sources say he started his prophetic ministry just 1 month after that May 62 CE sky phenomenon.
And what was his message?
He walked the streets of Jerusalem daily, crying out warnings, constant warnings about the city's destruction. Josephus documents this quite extensively.
Right, I think I remember reading that. He quotes him saying things like, "A voice from the east, a voice from the west, a voice against Jerusalem and the holy house."
That's the one. Day in, day out for 4 years leading up to the war.
Just imagine hearing that constantly.
Did he stop when the war began? No. Incredibly, he kept it up right through the Roman siege until he was actually killed by a stone launched from a Roman catapult during the final assault. A grim end.
So that 4-year gap between the initial sign in 62 and the war starting in 66, it's not just incidental time passing.
No, it's theologically significant in this interpretation. It demonstrates God's patience, right? 4 years of explicit warning. It shows the prophecy's precision, matching Revelation's structure of seals preceding trumpets. And it keeps the history accurate. You can't just squish everything together.
It also fits a pattern we see elsewhere in the Bible, doesn't it? Warnings often come before major judgment.
It does. So it's really important as a listener trying to grasp this framework, not to collapse this preliminary warning period into the war itself. They are distinct phases.
Understood. So the warnings have been given, the seals are opened, which leads us inevitably to the conflict itself.
Right. Phase 2, the Jewish war period. This is where the trumpets and bowls of Revelation are seen to unfold. We're talking autumn 66 CE through to August 70 CE.
This is the actual revolt, the Jewish rebellion against Rome that Josephus describes in such harrowing detail.
Yes, the shift from signs and warnings, seals, to active, intense judgments, trumpets and bowls.
And there's another specific time period from Revelation that gets reinterpreted here, isn't there? The beast's 42-month authority.
Yes. Instead of some future global dictator, the sources argue this refers very precisely to the period when the Zealot faction controlled the Second Temple in Jerusalem during the internal Jewish Civil War.
How long did that last?
According to Josephus, the Zealot sedition, centered in the temple, lasted exactly 42 months.
Exactly.
So when they fully seized the temple complex in January 67 CE, until the daily sacrifices were forced to stop on July 14th, 70 CE. That's precisely 3.5 years.
Wow. That lines up exactly with Revelation 11.2, 12.6, 13.5. Josephus even notes the exact date the sacrifices ceased and says they were never offered afterwards.
The mathematical precision is presented as strong evidence against coincidence. It suggests, a deliberate, divinely orchestrated timeline.
And the events of the war itself. They match Revelation's judgments in quite graphic ways, don't they?
Disturbingly so. Josephus gives horrific accounts of the civil war within Jerusalem, Jews killing Jews, even as the Romans besieged them. He details the relentless Roman siege tactics, breaking down the walls layer by layer.
And the famine. It's almost unbearable to read, the account of a mother eating her own child.
Yes, a direct and terrible fulfillment, arguably, of prophetic warnings. And the sheer scale of death, Josephus estimates, over 1 million Jewish people died in the siege and its aftermath. And, of course, the complete destruction of the temple in August 70 CE.
What about some of the more symbolic-sounding judgments, like the sea turning to blood?
Well, Josephus describes massacres where so many thousands were killed in bodies of water, specifically Lake Gennesaret, but also the Dead Sea and along the Mediterranean coast, that the water literally turned red with blood. He explicitly says of the Lake Gennesaret battle, the lake was all bloody. It wasn't necessarily symbolic.
Chilling. And the hailstones weighing a talent.
Also potentially literal. Josephus records the Romans using powerful siege engines, ballistae, that hurled massive stones. He specifies stones that were a talent in weight against the city walls. A talent was roughly 100 pounds.
So giant, deadly projectiles raining down. Matches the imagery quite well.
It does. These aren't abstract symbols in this view. They are descriptions of the documented horrors of the war.
Which leads to the fall of Babylon described in Revelation. If this timeline holds, Babylon isn't Rome.
No. In this interpretation, it's clearly Jerusalem. Revelation 11:8 calls it the great city, where also our Lord was crucified. That can really only be Jerusalem.
The city that rejected its Messiah and persecuted the early church.
Right. And its destruction in 70 CE was total. The city burned, the temple leveled, the population slaughtered or enslaved. The sacrificial system ended forever. It was the complete end of an era, the judgment foretold.
So after that absolute devastation in 70 CE, where does the timeline go? That brings us to the next phase.
Yes, phase 3, the millennium period. Now, this is probably one of the most radical reinterpretations. It covers the period from 70 CE up to 132 CE.
The millennium. Revelation 20,000 years. How does that fit here?
The argument is that the 1,000 years isn't a literal future kingdom on earth. Instead, it symbolically represents this specific historical period between the destruction of Jerusalem, the Old Center opposition, and the final Jewish revolt.
And Satan being bound.
It's interpreted as Satan being bound from deceiving the nations in a specific way primarily, from rallying widespread opposition around the old temple system or a false Jewish nationalism against the spreading gospel. With the temple gone, that specific avenue was closed for a time.
So what characterized this period 70 to 132 CE?
It was a time of huge growth for the church. The gospel spread rapidly across the Roman Empire without the direct opposition centered in Jerusalem. Jewish nationalism was, for a time, suppressed. The church began to solidify its identity as the true Israel. Temple-based Judaism essentially ceased to function.
A period of relative peace for the church and expansion, while the old system was effectively offline.
That's the idea, a symbolic reign corresponding to the church's establishment and growth.
Okay, which takes us to the final piece of this 74-year puzzle. Phase 4, the little season and final judgment. This runs from 132 CE to 136 CE.
Right. This centers entirely on the Bar Kokhba revolt. This was the last major attempt by Jewish forces to throw off Roman rule and, crucially, to rebuild the temple.
Led by Simon Bar Kokhba.
Yes, he was a charismatic leader. He even minted coins showing a rebuilt temple and inscribed, "For the freedom of Jerusalem." Some prominent figures, like the famous Rabbi Akiva, actually hailed him as the Messiah.
So this was a direct attempt to restore the old system, the very thing destroyed in 70 CE.
Exactly. A final desperate push. It ties into Jesus' warning in John's Gospel, doesn't it? "I have come in my Father's name, and you don't receive me. If another comes in his own name, him you will receive."
A tragic fulfillment, if so. How did the revolt end?
Catastrophically. The Roman response under Emperor Hadrian was brutal. The historian Dio Cassius estimates 580,000 Jewish fighters were killed, hundreds of towns destroyed. It was an utter, complete failure by 136 CE.
And this is seen as the final judgment described in Revelation.
It connects specifically to Revelation 20, verse 11, the description of judgment where earth and heaven fled away and there was found no place for them. This final crushing defeat of the Bar Kokhba revolt meant there was literally no place left for the old Jewish nationalistic, temple-centric hopes to revive. It was the definitive end.
And Rome made sure of it, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. Hadrian rebuilt Jerusalem as a Roman pagan city, Aelia Capitolina. He banned Jews from even entering it on pain of death. He destroyed scores of remaining fortified towns, and he renamed the entire province from Judea to Syria Palestina, deliberately trying to erase its Jewish identity. It was a thorough, permanent suppression.
Okay, so let's recap this whole arc for you, the listener. We've journeyed through a 74-year period, 62 CE to 136 CE. The argument presented by these sources is that Revelation's prophecies map onto this period with remarkable precision. Phase 1, the seals, 62 to 66 CE, warnings, signs, including armies in the sky and the prophet Jesus, son of Ananias. Phase 2, trumpets and bowls, 66 to 70 CE, the actual Jewish war, the 42-month zealot rule in the temple, the siege, the destruction of Jerusalem, Babylon. Phase 3, the millennium, 7132 CE, a symbolic period, Satan bound from deceiving via the temple system, church expansion. Phase 4, little season and final judgment, 132 to 136 CE. The Bar Kokhba revolt, the final attempt to restore the old system, utterly crushed, leaving no place for it.
And seeing it laid out like this, phase by phase, it shows a complete historical transition. A shift from the old covenant system centered on the temple in Jerusalem to the new covenant centered on Christ, proclaimed universally by the church. From a specific Jewish nationalism to a global gospel.
So understanding this framework, for you listening, it fundamentally changes how you might read Revelation. It potentially moves it from being primarily a guidebook to our future to being a powerful testament to God's faithfulness and prophetic accuracy demonstrated in history long ago.
Yeah.
It becomes a record of judgment executed and promises fulfilled.
It really does transform the book's immediate context and message.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to consider. If these detailed prophecies found such specific, historically documented fulfillments within that 74-year window in the 1st and 2nd centuries,
Yeah.
what does that imply about how prophecy works? And maybe, how should it shape our approach to understanding other prophetic texts in the Bible today? Something to think about.